Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie, here at First United Methodist in Yankton, South Dakota, and I'm glad you could join me for this episode. In this episode, I want to focus a little bit more on our sermon series that we've been doing for the month of October called 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. This is based on a book that was written originally about 20 years ago by Bishop Robert Schnase of the United Methodist Church and was recently updated and re-released this year. So far in October, we have covered 3 Sundays of the series. We have 2 left, but as I will not be preaching this weekend, I wanted to supplement the wonderful words you will hear from Reverend Carl Watkins with some of my ideas and thoughts around risk-taking mission and service. So just to be clear on what we've covered so far, we have covered radical hospitality, passionate worship, and intentional faith development. These are all, again, things that are vital to churches that are fruitful, that are living into their mission, that are doing what they were created to do and being what God intended them to be. And that is the kind of church that I think we should all strive to be. And so it's good to be reminded of the basics as we continue to live into what does it mean for us to be the church and how do we do that effectively. And so risk-taking mission and service. So mission and service, I think we understand that should be a part, but I think that's been one of the areas that has been really hit hard in the last few years as far as priorities around our time and our energy and in our investment. And in reading the book and reading the chapter in the book, which I would encourage you if you are interested, there's a lot more in the book than what I lift up during any sermon or podcast. And so I would encourage you to consider getting the book if you are interested in any of these topics. But one of the things that they talk about is part of the, one of the reasons that it's good for us to go through this is because for whatever reason, one way or another, we've tend to lost some of these practices as churches. And so part of understanding how to get it back is understanding why we lost it in the first place. And I think with risk-taking mission and service, or mission and service in general, and this is a church that has a really rich, deep history in mission and service. But part of the reason I think that in general that this has been kind of waned is because there was an understanding again. And if you listened to my podcast last week, I talked more in depth about how kind of the understanding and viewpoint of what church was and church involvement was for a long time centered and was solely about worship and corporate worship together. Is that central to who we are? Is that important? Is that vital and valid? Yes. But everything else kind of got treated as like optional add-ons. The way that Bishop Schnase talks about in his book, which I thought was really helpful, is like if you've ever been on a cruise. Now, I've never personally been on a cruise. If anyone wants to send me on a cruise for Pastor Appreciation Month, I'm not gonna be mad about that. But my understanding, my parents have gone on a couple cruises, is that you pay for the cruise. Everything on the ship typically is all included, like all your food, all your beverages, everything. But you can add on like these day excursions or these different activities to your cruise. So maybe, it's stop when a ship takes a stop, you can go in for a day hike, or you can go snorkeling, or you can go whatever it is. Again, I've never been on a cruise, so I don't really know. But we tend to, all of these practices that are actually essential to our faith, we've kind of taken to be like these optional add-ons that, like, if I want to do more, I can do more, but that's not really necessary. That's not really vital. I still have the cruise, so I'm fine. When in reality, it's all of these things together that make up a life of faith. It's all of these things together that are means of grace for us. All of these things together that help us to grow more and more into the likeness of Christ. All of these things together that help us in our discipleship. And so rather than thinking of these other things as kind of add-ons, if you have the time, the money, or the energy, to think of them more as essential elements to a healthy faith life. And so I think that, and missions and service in particular, I think really do seem to have that people approach those with that mindset of, yeah, I'll do that when I have the time, or when I have the inclination, or when I have the energy, and that's just not right now. And I get that because people are busy, they're overcommitted. I will name that. They saying yes to mission and service in the church is a really hard thing to do when you've said yes to so many things. And one of the challenges that we have practically, so I'm going to speak of kind of all of this stuff before I go into why we should be doing this, right? One of the challenges practically that we have is our families in particular. All of the things that are available to them now have so many strings attached. So what do I mean by that? If you have children who are interested or athletically inclined, there is more and more pressure for them to start sooner and sooner, not only to start when they're younger in being in these different sports or activities, but then to not only participate in the school sanctioned ones, but also in traveling teams, and also in this and that, and there's and doing camps and doing this. So you're, as a parent, investing much earlier in your child's activities and sports, and but it's not limited to sports, but also now as they grow older, it becomes more and more and more and more and more of your time, more of your energy. It's every weekend. It's oftentimes multiple weeknights as well. It's your money and the cost of travel teams, and the cost of uniforms and costumes and all of the things, and it can become very overwhelming, and you feel like you are not in control of that pipeline a little bit. And so it becomes very hard if you say yes to something to kind of get out of that, if you even wanted to. Because there's also this belief of like, I want my child to succeed, and I want them to do, have all of these opportunities, and to not deny them this if this is something that they love. And as a parent, I understand that. But I always go back to, if you don't prioritize and make faith development a priority in your child's life and expect them as an adult to find that, it's not impossible, but it's not likely. Or if you tell your child faith is important, God is important, Christ is important in your life, but then don't back that up with making it a priority in your schedule, that's sending pretty mixed signals to your children. And so I think that's not a reason necessarily to do things, but I think I want to name that as a very big hurdle in culture today. Also, just the in broader culture, the belief that church is somehow not relevant. And so when people are involved, they often are involved in kind of the default settings of church, which are try to attend worship, send my kids to Sunday school, and those are great things. But these other areas of service and ministry and mission tend to fall by the wayside because they are not higher up or integrated in our understanding of what is necessary for faith development. Even though I would argue that things like mission and service tend to be the most transformative of the things that we do as Christians. It is mission and service that truly work on our hearts, that change our minds, that grow in us the fruit of the Spirit, in particular our fruit of love, our fruit of gentleness and faithfulness and compassion. And so yeah, so we find ourselves in a season of the church where I think the call to serve and the call to serve not just the church but also the world because of our faith is probably at an all-time low, when it really, that is the greatest gift that we have to offer people. This last week in the sermon, I talked about intentional faith development and doing things intentionally and doing things regularly, and that, a haphazard commitment to our faith is going to produce not great results. But if we are truly committed to following Christ, again, not to try to save our souls, Christ does that without without our help. That is a gift that we are given, but we are given that gift to become disciples. We are given that gift to live into the kingdom of God now. That is our gift. But with that gift comes great responsibility, as far as being workers in the kingdom and raising up other disciples and creating a world that is better. And isn't that what we all want and what we all need right now? I would argue yes. So one of the practices of fruitful congregations is a commitment to risk-taking mission and service. It is a commitment to serving others. It is a commitment to looking beyond ourselves and our own needs, and finding that our needs are met when we are meeting the needs of others. And I think there's plenty of people in this church that we could turn to and hear their stories of how service and mission has changed their lives, people who are passionate about it and whose faith runs deep, and we know it and we see it. And they do it not because they feel like, if I don't do it, then nobody's going to do it, but they do it because it is in their soul to do. That service is an integral part of their faith development. It is an integral part of how they live out their love of God and love of others. And so they don't need the pastor telling them to do it. They seek that out on their own. And so I want to talk a little bit about, what is our scriptural basis for this? And my short answer is the entire Bible. The entire Bible, from beginning to end, points to God's people being redeemed and God's people being loved and called to do the same. From the very beginning, we hear in Genesis, Abraham being blessed by God, but God also tying the blessing of Abraham to the blessing of the nations. God is saying, I will bless you. You are blessed to be a blessing. You are blessed so that your blessing will benefit others, that I am working in and through you to share my love with others. And so from the very beginning, we get this expectation with the blessing. Abraham didn't earn the blessing. The blessing was given to him freely by God, but God said, I am doing this for a reason. And here's the reason: that not that you just sit in your favor, but that you would use what you have to bless others, that you would use what you have to raise others up and to lift them out of their struggles into new life as well. We see it throughout the Old Testament and the prophets that God is a God of justice and righteousness, that Israel, in their laws, they are meant to always be looking for the outsider, for the widow, for the outcast, for the poor, and so many of the laws that we like to skip over in the book of Leviticus, in Numbers, it tends to be around how do we welcome the stranger, how do we provide for those who cannot provide for themselves, and how can we show hospitality and kindness. And that is our justice. And then it goes on to say, part of the reason that that Israel was instructed to do those things is because at one point that was Israel. Do not forget that you were slaves in Egypt, that you were the ones who were the outsiders, that you were the ones who were the strangers, that you were the ones who were the enemies. And people showed that to you. And more importantly, that God showed those things to you. And if God treats you in this way, you are to turn around and treat others in this way. There is a parable that Jesus teaches in the Gospels where there is a man who goes before the king and has this incredible debt to pay, and he cannot pay it. He could not pay it if he had 100 lifetimes to work. It was such an incredible debt. You wonder, how does someone get into such debt? And the king takes pity really on the man, has compassion on him, and says, your debt is forgiven. You are free to go. And as the man is leaving the palace, runs into someone else, a fellow countryman, who owed him a small amount of money. And that man turned around and demanded that his countryman pay him the debt that was owed him. And if he didn't, he was going to throw him in prison. And then Jesus says, when the king found this out, he threw that man who he had forgiven into prison, because that man had been given a blessing, but then did not turn around and offer that same blessing to others, did not see the need to extend the same kind of grace that was given him to someone who owed him just as he had owed the king. So I say that because I think that sometimes we sort of get into a narrow mindset and just kind of worrying about me, myself, and I, me and my own, and that everyone else, they need to just worry about themselves, and there's no real call to care about other people and to care about their struggles and to care about what's going on in their life and the needs that they have. But all throughout Scripture, if we are truly to be followers of Christ, we have to care about it. The greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. If you see your neighbor in need and you do nothing about it, are you truly loving God? In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talks about the sheep and the goats. Matthew 25 is one of my favorite chapters in all of Scripture. I go back to it constantly because I really believe that as a disciple of Jesus, it lays out the motivation for how we should be living our lives. And that is Jesus, when people get to the end of their life and it comes to the time where you're coming before God for that judgment, and people come before him and say, and God says to them, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. I was naked and you clothed me. Well done. And they were like, Lord, when did we see you and do all of these things? Like, I don't remember you ever being there. And Christ says, when you did it for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. But then he says the opposite. He goes, I was hungry to other people. I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was sick and you didn't help me. I was in prison and you didn't visit me. I was a stranger and you didn't welcome me. I was naked and you didn't clothe me. When you didn't do it for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you didn't do it for me. And they had the same response. Lord, when did we see you hungry? We would have fed you. We would have given you something to drink. We never saw you. But you did. Because there are people all around who need these things. And my calling and my command for you is to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you are not seeing the people around you as people who have needs, then you're not seeing me. I go back to that constantly because I am constantly convicted by it, because it is so much easier to live life where you're just worried about yourself or your immediate family, and it feels too messy and too hard to do anything beyond that. But again, as a follower of Christ, Christ made no qualms about what we are called to do and what he expects of us. And what he expects of us is to be in mission and service. And the last night that he was alive, his last time together with his disciples before his crucifixion, Jesus met with them in the upper room. And we often remember what he said in the breaking of the bread and in the drinking of the wine, how he was willing to lay down his life for them. But he did something before that. As they gathered, he took a towel and he knelt down and he began washing the disciples' feet, a task that would have been so beneath him, so beneath any of the disciples, that they were offended that he would even stoop so low. And they said, and Peter even says, like, Lord, this is not okay. Like, you're not going to wash my feet. This is a disgusting job that you shouldn't be doing. And Jesus says, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. And then he goes on to tell them, do as I've done. Meaning, offer yourselves in service to one another. Prior to that meeting, the disciples had started to get into quabbles about who was the most important among them, who was going to sit at Jesus' right and left hand. And Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you must become like a servant. It's not about your own glory and honor. It's about serving. It's about putting everyone else's needs and wants and recognizing your own and making sure that you're filling your cup, but also not that you're only filling your cup. Recently, I studied the Enneagram this summer when I did my week-long retreat in the hills, and I found out that I was type 2. If you take Enneagram, that might mean something to you. If you don't, it certainly won't, because it didn't for me. But type 2 is the helper. So I have a personality type that really will tend to deny myself in order to make sure everyone else's needs are met. And I think that has become even more so in my role as clergy, because these are the scriptures that I'm reading, and I feel like, oh man, deny myself constantly, because everyone else is who I need to love and take care of. And so for someone like that, if you are an Enneagram 2, I want you to hear this as well. Jesus says to love your neighbor as you love yourself, meaning how you treat your neighbor needs to be how you treat yourself as well, that you are worthy of whatever you would offer them. So for some of us, in our call to service and our call to mission, we need to be reminded to love our neighbors. We are busy loving ourselves, and maybe that is taking up all the air and space in the room, that we have left no time, no energy, no ability to love people outside of our immediate area, immediate concern. And for others, it is, do not forget to treat yourself in the same way that you treat others. Maybe for some of you, it is a lot easier to love others than it is to love yourself. And yourself needs to be included in that. So again, going back to, how does this tie into a church and fruitfulness in a church? A church needs to be about what we believe. We need to not only have good theology, not only do we need to have good beliefs about who God is and what God has done, we need to live out our faith. In the words of the prophets, DC Talk, love is a verb, and that verb is risk-taking mission and service, about showing our love, not only through what we say, but what we do. And a church will not succeed in any of its endeavors if it does not live out, if its people do not live out the calling to serve the needs of the church in creating disciples, because again, nobody else does that. Nobody else cares about that like the church does. That's part of why we exist, is because we are a community together that has committed to raising up disciples of Jesus Christ. And our own mission statement, it is to grow disciples. But that takes people who are willing to serve in areas to make that happen. And so service is a requirement. It is a requirement for intentional faith development, because guess what? In order to have those small groups, in order to have those studies, in order to have those opportunities, people have to give of themselves to help lead it, to help pray for it, to help guide it. We can't have intentional faith development without people already committing to service. We cannot have passionate worship without people committing to leading passionate worship, including our musicians, including our tech people, including even the pastor. That's service. That is service. Our greeters, our ushers, our fellowship people, our people who are, working with our children and our youth. All of that is needed. Passionate worship doesn't happen without service. Radical hospitality does not happen unless we have people willing to serve, to be radically hospitable. That was one of the challenges that we've had in the last 3 years, is an unwillingness to serve, and therefore we did not practice things like hospitality because we had no people resources for a while. All of these things are connected together. You can't have one without having the others. And that's why fruitful churches have all 5 of these practices, because again, they're all related. They're all connected. They all work together. And if you don't have one, like the likelihood is you probably don't have the others. And so again, this practice undergirds a lot of what we're doing. And a lot of what we're doing also undergirds this practice, because how do people get to a place of wanting to offer themselves in service and mission? They get through their intentional faith development. Because you get to a point in your faith development where you realize it is not just about what I think, it is about what I do. That being a disciple of Jesus is about following Jesus in his steps, in his ways, in his teachings, and in his doings, and that we are called to do the same. It is through worship, being fed, that we can go out and do. Again, they're all connected to each other. So I mentioned before that our church is a church that has a rich history in missions and service. So when I think of these two terms, service, I tend to think of more internally, serving the needs of the church so that we can fulfill our mission, and particularly discipleship mission, discipleship and worship in particular, I would say. Risk-taking mission, that is our outward focus, because a church does not exist for itself. Our purpose is not to perpetuate the church. Our purpose is to grow disciples of Jesus Christ and equip them for ministry in the world. Ministry in the world is mission. Mission is any sort of outward focused thing that we are doing to reach people for Jesus, to show them the love and hope that is found in Christ alone. And so we've had people in this church in the past that have gone as far as Haiti to be the light of Christ, to offer love and hope, to meet the needs of people where they are. But I'll be honest with you, we don't have to travel as far as Haiti to find need. We don't have to travel very far at all. In the neighborhood in which our church is located, there is a great amount of need. In Yankton itself, there is a great amount of need. And so there's a lot of opportunity for mission from our church. A lot of ways that we can use the ways in which we have been blessed to be a blessing. I want to talk a little bit about what we are doing, because I'm super proud of it, but to also encourage you to have your eyes and ears open to where God might be leading you and the needs that God might be showing you. So one of the things we've been involved in for a very long time is the banquet. The banquet serves meals to people in Yankton who are in need. There's no checking credentials at the door. Anyone could show up to have a meal at the banquet that happens on Thursday nights. It's hosted over at the UCC Church. And what I love about doing that is I think true mission is we have to get our hands involved. We have to get our feet involved. We have to get ourselves involved. Anytime where we can bump up against people, that we can sit with people, that we can not only serve, but to create relationships and begin to listen and to hear people, that's good mission. I once read a book called Toxic Charity, where it talked about the ways in which the American church has done a lot of mission work and charity work, and realizing that our good intentions often can lead to some pretty unhealthy dynamics and situations. But one of the ways in which we can counteract that is through focusing on mission that's local and relational. And for us to stop thinking about how can we be in mission to someone and how can we be in mission with someone. And so that's one of the things I love about the banquet is, and I think probably the most important piece of it, people tend to often overlook or they feel uncomfortable. But let me tell you, if you're in mission and you feel uncomfortable, you're probably doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And that is eating with the people. Again, we're not there just to serve and to stay disconnected and to have a counter between us and them, because that just reinforces that there is an us and them instead of a we, that we are here together, that we have gathered together, and that we are God's people together. So my favorite part of serving the banquet, and to me, the most important part of serving the banquet, is eating. Because if I don't eat there, if I insist that I'm just here to serve you and I don't eat with you, it is somehow that meal is not good enough for me. That this is good enough for you, and I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're thankful, but I actually have no interest in getting to know you at all because you're not real to me. So having the people sit and eat at the banquet, I think, is the most important part of that ministry, because it forces us to listen, to see the other person, as a neighbor, as a friend, as someone in need of the same things that we are in need of, which is to belong somewhere, to have someone see them and hear them. If they're struggling with something, someone can validate that struggle and be like, that is really hard. Yeah. To me, that's the transforming part of a mission like the banquet, and why we keep going back and we keep serving, not because there's the need there is the need there, but because I think for more of us, there's a need here to have an opportunity to be in community with those here in Yankton who are struggling. Because it's only then that we have our eyes open to what's going on and that we can do something about it. So I think that one's really important. The other one that I'm really proud of, and it's a relatively new one, is our Loads of Love, which again did not originate with us. We were invited into it. So that one originated at Trinity Lutheran, and they got it from a church in Sioux Falls that was doing this kind of ministry. But it came out of the kind of conversations that you have at a place like the banquet, where when you start to get to know people and you start to ask the questions of like, what is challenging right now for you? And to have people say things like, I don't have the money or the means or the time to do my laundry because I'm working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. It costs this much to do a load. Not only that, but then I also need detergent. And when am I going to do it? When am I going to do that? I'm trying to make ends meet. I don't have these things available to me. Something as simple as laundry, that for so many of us, it is just a necessary part of our existence. We don't think much of it other than, when someone hasn't folded our laundry and put it away. So someone had that conversation, heard that need, and said, that's something I can help with. And so at Trinity Lutheran, they began doing TLC, which was their laundry mission, but they began to see that the need was greater than what their one church could meet, and they invited other churches into it. And the UCC church and us responded and said, we will join together and try to help meet that need as well. And that's when it became Loads of Love, where we again, like the banquet, we don't check credentials at the door. We will offer to do your laundry. We don't do it for them. We pay for it. We provide the money and the detergent and the dryer sheets if needed. But again, to me, there's value in being in a place of can I help you? But I will say for me, again, it goes back to while they're waiting for their laundry to have those conversations, just to get to know people. And I want to share this story. So the last time I was there, I was sharing with a couple that have come in of that we have these prayer cards available now. And now we have them in both English and Spanish. I cannot speak Spanish, but I can point to the Spanish ones if there's someone there who speaks Spanish. But this couple, I just said, we have these available if you're interested. And then the gentleman joked saying, like, do you have a bigger one? Because I have a lot of things I'd like to talk to God about. And I said, well, I can do you one better. I'm a pastor and I'd be happy to pray with you today. And we just got to visiting, and he shared about how much he loved his wife and how he tells her every single day that he loves her. And I just remember coming away from that conversation just like feeling really blessed to have had that conversation that day. And the other day I was in Hy-Vee, and it was a crazy day. Hy-Vee had some special going on, and there were a lot of people there. And I turned down an aisle, and I was with my son Ethan, who was also with me that day on Loads of Love. And this couple was standing right there, and I looked at them and I said, I know you. And they looked at me kind of like, we know you too. And I went, you tell your wife that you love her every single day. And he's like, I do. I do. I can't tell you in that moment what I saw in the faces of those two people when I did remember. You weren't just two people that we did their laundry and then forgot about. You were two people that I remembered because you had an impact on me. And I just remember seeing them, feeling seen. They're real. And now I know every time I see them, I'm going to know who they are. And same, they'll know me. And we have a connection now that we wouldn't have had I not been willing to go and to serve and to listen and to just offer myself, imperfect as I am. They blessed me that day. And I think that connection has blessed both of us. That's what's transforming about mission work. That's what's transforming us more and more into the image of Christ, because Christ sees them as beloved, and they are beloved. And now I get to see that too. And I never would have known had I not been there that day. And so I say all of these things. We do our Angel Tree with Milks Camp. We do different drives and things, and we have different opportunities for missions coming up. But I really want us to continue as a church to pursue missions that open our eyes to the people of our community. Because when we start to see them as people, and people that we like, and people that we love, then the things that they are dealing with become our problems too. And then we will make a difference. And so I encourage you as the church, open your heart to ways in which you can serve others. Find one way that you can plug into this. And if you're a little uncomfortable, know that that's probably a good thing. It's probably the right thing. And that's okay. If you're not sure, come talk to me and we'll see what we can figure out together. I would love to help you with that. And I would love for you to constantly hold me to it as well, because it is a vital practice of any Christian and any Christian church. I hope that you are in worship this week. Reverend Carl Watkins is going to be there to share the message. I will be joining you online as I will be out of the state for the weekend. So, and then the following week, don't forget, bring your pledge card, your estimate of giving card for 2024 on the 29th, because that is the day that we're going to be blessing them. Again, asking God to take what we have been blessed with and use it as a blessing in our community and world. In between there, we've got Soup Kitchen and Trunk or Treat next week. And so make sure you have those on your calendar, and I'll see you all. I'll be here for Soup Kitchen, so hope to see you there. Invite your friends and neighbors to come and have the best meal in town, and then come back the next day to see all of the kids kick off kind of the Halloween week and getting to wear their costumes and have some fun. So until next time, God bless. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Wednesday nights at 6:15 or Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. You can also worship with us online at firstumcyankton.org or find us on YouTube.